Pass rushers come in all shapes and sizes. You've got light, explosive speed rushers, big, strong power rushers, the technicians who might not be strong or explosive but can still win with great hand usage, and of course there are the rare unicorns that have all of those elements rolled into one. I like to refer to the overall spectrum of talent as the 5 tools of pass rushing, similar to the 5 tools of baseball, with the best players on the spectrum usually possessing most, if not all, of those 5 tools: explosiveness, length, flexibility, power, and technique. When I personally evaluate defensive ends and rush linebackers coming out of college, those are the individual categories that I grade all of them on first before giving them a final score, and it's a system that's especially useful for weighing prospects against each other from different draft classes. So naturally, with Nick Bosa coming out of Ohio State this year, I couldn't resist the temptation to directly compare him to his older brother Joey, and to the surprise of pretty much no one, they came out looking like damn near identical prospects. Joey has a slight edge in some combine benchmarks, while Nick has the edge in others, but overall their athletic grades and their tape grades came out very close to one another. In fact, I'd venture to say that if Nick were wearing a Chargers jersey last year, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell the difference on the field because they truly are that similar. But with that similarity in both numbers and in tape, I feel like some of the concerns that I already have about the older Bosa, I'm going to have about the younger Bosa as well once he's in the league. For starters, Nick did not have an elite first step on tape, and that was backed up by a fairly average vertical jump of 33.5 inches at the combine, which is fine, don't get me wrong, but it's not great. Of the top 15 sack leaders among edge defenders last season, only 2 of them posted verticals of less than 34 inches at their respective combines. And keep in mind that 34 inches is typically the bare minimum benchmark that you look for in a franchise edge rusher, with 35 or 36 plus inches being more ideal. Not being vertically explosive doesn't completely kill Nick as a prospect, obviously, just like it didn't kill his older brother, but we have to acknowledge that it does make a difference and it does show up on tape, so it has to be considered as a knock in his overall grade. When you look at elite explosiveness at the edge position, like say Von Miller for example, you can see why it's valuable to have a great first step off the snap to beat the tackle to the corner, because if he beats the tackle to that spot before they can slide to it, it shortens the arc that he has to run around that corner, which then translates to faster and more reliable pressure on the quarterback. Miller's 37 inches of vertical explosiveness show up in every step that he takes, and the ability to get that edge so quickly is in part what makes him such a dangerous pass rusher. Bosa, however, who is significantly less explosive, cannot rely on pure burst to beat the tackle in a race to the corner, and since he's not beating the tackle to that spot, now he has an even longer path to run around the edge because he didn't get to the corner first. That means the quarterback has more space to step up into the pocket because Bosa's rush will not be as quick around the edge, and it means that Bosa will not be able to close and finish the rush as quickly once he does get around the edge because again he's just not as explosive. Not having an elite first step is a real problem for outside pass rushers in the NFL, and that's why so very few of them can succeed in this league without it. So knowing all that, it then begs the question, if the Bosa brothers do not have great first steps and they don't win around the edge with just raw burst, how are they still generating a ton of pressures and sacks? Well, the answer, as you might expect, is that they use 3 of those 5 tools that I mentioned earlier to make up for it: power, technique, and flexibility. If you cannot shorten that corner that you have to run around by using speed, then you've got to shorten it by doing something else. And for both Joey and Nick, that something else is this move right here. It's all about converting speed to power and using that power, leverage, hand placement, and hip flexibility to do all the work, rather than just relying on speed that they don't even have. If Bosa was trying to play like Miller here and just use his burst to get a step ahead and then dip around the corner, he wouldn't be able to do it because he's not built for that. The tackle is already in a good spot to just turn and ride any speed rush around the back of the pocket because Bosa could not get past his hips fast enough. But keep in mind that Nick is also very aware of what he is and is not capable of, so he's not even going to try to win that way in the first place. Bosa knows that his only option on most snaps is to go through the tackle rather than around him to shorten that corner, and if we've learned anything about both him and Joey over the years, it's that both of them are masters of doing just that. Watch how he angles himself back into the tackle's frame on the 3rd step in his get-off. He drops his leverage so that he can generate more power, and then bull rushes straight through the tackle's left shoulder. This is called rushing half a man, and when you rush half a man and put all that force into only one shoulder of the blocker in front of you, it almost immediately forces their hips to start to open in the direction you want them to open. Some coaches call this opening the gate, and you can see the tackle's left foot is being forced back a little bit to try to anchor against all of that power going into one concentrated spot. Even though it only looks like a few inches difference in terms of where he's stepping, trust me, that few inches is the equivalent of cracking a gate open just enough for you to grab a handle on the other side so that you can open it the rest of the way. The left tackle's entire trajectory in his kick slide is now different because of Bosa's technique and power knocking him off track. And in turn, that change of trajectory is what shortens the corner for Bosa and makes his angle to the quarterback more manageable. He's no longer got to go the long way around with speed and try to turn extra hard at the last possible second to finish the sack. Now he's running directly at the QB and getting there with the shortest path possible. Obviously, he didn't get a sack here because the quarterback was able to throw it away in time, but this is still a dead play in my book, and it's a dead play caused in part by Bosa's ability to convert speed to power. This is what he does game after game, just like Joey has done it game after game during his career. Either they use power to shorten the corner, or they use the same little jab-swipe combo that's become a bit of a family trademark, or they set up the swipe before countering back inside on a beautiful arm-over move as well. I mean, as far as polished skill sets go, Nick is every bit the out-of-the-box, day-one product that his brother was. He is exceptionally good at using his strengths to cover for his weaknesses, and that in itself is a very, very rare quality. But, all that being said, just because he's great at covering his weaknesses doesn't mean that he has no weaknesses. Remember that 5-tool grading system again, we've only covered 4 of them so far. We know he's got a ton of power and really fluid hips around the edge and better technique than 99% of all college defensive linemen, and we also know that all of those things make up for him not being very twitchy. But the 5th element here, arm length, is really what will make or break him as a player. Nick only has 33-inch arms, which is extremely short for an edge defender. For context, out of all defensive ends measured at the Combine in the last 20 years, that 33 inches is only in the 26th percentile for arm length. When compared to every offensive tackle prospect from the same time period, 91% of all tackles have a reach advantage against him. And what that translates to is Bosa getting locked out far too often when facing tackles that can both outreach him and who have good enough technique to neutralize his favorite moves. For instance, when he played against the Oklahoma offensive line back in 2017, it was arguably the most talented group he faced during his college career, and they had at least 4 starters on that line that either have already been or will end up being drafted. That was the closest and most accurate representation of what it's going to look like when Bosa is actually in the NFL playing against NFL caliber lines, and I gotta say, he struggled for most of the day against those 2 big tackles that had long arms and knew how to use them. Bobby Evans, for example, who's also probably going to be a mid-round pick this year, really did not have a whole lot of trouble handling Bosa once he got his hands inside on Nick's chest. Evans has nearly a full 2-inch reach advantage in this matchup, and as long as he was able to maintain his grip on Bosa's chest without letting that swipe move clear his hands out of the way, there was literally nothing Nick could do to retaliate and gain the upper hand. He didn't have the length to get into Evans' own chest and shorten that corner with power while he himself was also being locked out, so all Evans had to do was just keep him at arm's distance and force him the long way around, which as we know isn't ideal for a guy like Bosa because of his lack of explosiveness. This is exactly what I noticed with the older Bosa as well when he first came into the league, because at times he's also been known to struggle against longer tackles with disciplined hands like Gosser Cherilus, Taylor Lewan, and Lane Johnson. And it just once again brings up this big question. If we already know that Joey struggles against length, and we've already seen Nick struggle against length too, what kind of ceiling can we expect here if we're going to be investing in him with a top 5 pick? To me, the end result for both of them is a very feast or famine rushing style that can lead to pressures and sacks in bunches when the initial swipe moves or power moves are working well, but then on the flip side, sometimes they'll get absolutely nothing when facing a tackle that can actually use his hands. We know that Nick is going to put up numbers no matter what because there's enough really bad tackles in the NFL to ensure that he will always get those numbers, and Joey has obviously shown us that already, but at the same time, we also know that there will be games where Nick completely disappears against equal competition, and we're just going to have to acknowledge that and be okay with it in order to be okay with picking him. Some general managers will love that his floor is higher than guys like Khalil Mack and Myles Garrett when they were coming out of college, while others will hate that his ceiling is nowhere near either one of them, But remember that just because Bosa's athletic profile is not as high as some past top 5 prospects does not mean that he himself is still not a top 5 prospect. As much as I like to give context to Joey's statistics all the time, even I am not dumb enough to think that he wasn't worth his 3rd overall selection to the Chargers. He was absolutely worth it and will continue to be worth it for years to come, because honestly there's a lot of value in knowing that the guy that you're picking that high in the draft is virtually bust proof. And to me, the quality of being bust proof is where most of their value as prospects comes from. Sure, Nick and Joey might not boom as much as some other guys around the league, but if all you're looking for as a GM is someone who will be guaranteed to provide a stable return on investment, the Bosa brothers are about as clean of prospects as it gets. Joey is not better than Nick, and Nick is not better than Joey, and I mean that in the best way possible, because after all, if both of them are so predictably productive that picking them in the top 5 can't be wrong, well, then it's pretty hard not to be right. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode, and I also want to thank our sponsor, MyBookie, for helping to make it happen. If you guys have watched this channel long enough, you probably already know MyBookie, which means you're probably confused as to why I'm promoting them in the off-season, but here's the thing, they're taking bets for the 2019 season right now, and a lot of those bets have really damn good odds because September's so far away. This time last year, the Chiefs' over-under of wins was only 8.5, which they smashed, obviously, by going 12-4, and at the same time, betting on the Bears to even make the playoffs was paying out at like 9-1 odds, let alone winning the division outright. So there's a lot of great bets to be made this time of year, especially if you're really confident in something happening that maybe seems unlikely at the time. I like to call it a steak dinner bet personally, because you can put down $10 and the winnings pay for an entire steak dinner. Like the Bears one would have, it would have given you about $90 return. So I make a couple of them every single year to try to get myself a free steak dinner, because why not? This year I'm putting down $10 on the Packers to win the NFC at 10-1 odds, which seems very generous to me personally. Will they win it? Probably not, but they've already got a damn good roster and 2 first-round picks that are going to be adding even more into their talent pool, and they have Aaron Rodgers, and Mike McCarthy's no longer there, so I definitely like those odds more than most. So if you like that idea and you want to join me in making some small steak dinner bets and maybe jumping in on some of the juicier March Madness lines as well, hit up the link below and enter promo code Brett on sign up at MyBookie, and that will give you a 50% sign up bonus as their way of saying thank you. And then also let me know in the comments below what crazy but still totally plausible steak dinner bets you're making this year, because I'm very intrigued to see what you guys are thinking about some of these odds, because a few of them are downright wacky to me. But anyway, check out that link and then come back on Monday, because we have another full Film Room episode releasing in just a few days. That one is on DK Metcalf, who has been highly requested since he lit up the Combine a few weeks ago. I think you guys are going to like that one a lot, so I'll see you on Monday with that, and until then, later.